Hello, everyone. This is Nayiri from Low Carb and Fasting. Now, this episode is part of the series on this channel called Type 1 Diabetics Talk, where host and guest or guests are Type 1. And you guessed it, we talk about Type 1 diabetes and our personal experiences with the disease and how we manage our Type 1 diabetes. Today's guest is a fellow Type 1 diabetic. She's called the T1D Mimi on social media, both on Instagram and Facebook. Please follow her page. The link will be below. Now, she is called Susan Keuter. Susan, welcome to Low Carb and Fasting.
Thank you, Nayiri. I'm happy to be here.
I've been looking forward to this for a very, very long time.
Oh, hi.
You've been an inspiration to so many Type 1s.
Well, thank you.
On your social media, people come to you to ask how you're doing it. How are you managing your blood sugars so well? And you give advice so freely. Even in my own Type 1 groups, I often think of you, or I see a question, I think, do you know what? I'll leave that. I do wonder if Susan will see it and she'll tackle it, and then I come and add, my view to it. So you're respected in our community. So let's start with your Type 1 diabetes sort of diagnosis story.
Okay.
And when did you switch to a low carbohydrate way of eating?
Well, let's start back at the way beginning, 39 years ago.
You were 18 then, right?
I was 18, yes, and it was a week or so, almost 2 weeks before my birthday. And I was a freshman in college, and I was about 2,000 miles away from my parents in college. And I'd been losing weight. Everybody was talking about the freshman 15, and I'm like, this is awesome. I'm losing weight and I feel thin. And the only problem was I was exhausted. I was tired. I was eating huge amounts of food, which no one could understand why I was losing weight and eating huge amounts of food and drinking so much. I was drinking high C out of a can with a hole punched in it for my straw. And if you know what high C is, it's like Kool-Aid nowadays. Anyway, finally, my roommate said, "You smell like juicy fruit gum all of the time." And I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means, but thank you for telling me that. So I had a couple other issues come up, and I'm like, I just need to run to the doctor. Run to the doctor at Student Health, and he listened to my symptoms, and I think he knew immediately what was going on, but he did my blood draw, and on his meter at Student Health, it did not register. It just said HI. And he said, our meter goes up to 1,000. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means, but I have a math test in the next hour. So can you give me the shot or give me a pill or whatever and let me go do my math test? And he said, oh, no, 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 no. I did go take my math test, but I had to go back to Student Health. He got me a referral to an endocrinologist. 2 days later, I went to an endocrinologist, sat on a tissue paper covered table in a gown with, at the time I was 18, so he seemed ancient, but he was probably in his early 60s doctor. And the doctor said, you might see 35. Now, keep in mind, I was 18 at the time, and he told this to me. He said, you might see 35. He said, my recommendation would be you drop out of college, move back in with your parents, prepare to take care of them as they get older. And I'm like, I was 18. My parents were not even 50. I mean, they were 40, I think. And he said, prepare to take care of your parents and just be comfortable in your life as you're a diabetic. And I said, that makes no sense to me. I'm in my second semester, my freshman year in college. Like, I have big goals. I'm going to take New York City by storm and change the advertising community. And he's like, oh, there. That's cute. No, you're not. You're diabetic and you're going to die early because of diabetes. That's what he told an 18-year-old.
What year was
So
this? Are we talking the 70s?
1985.
85.
Yeah. And so I went home with a vial of, I've tried to do the research to figure out what it was. I think it was Lente. Lente and regular were the two insulins that I started on. They were what I had, and a box of syringes. We didn't have meters at this point. I was sent home with a urine testing kit to take to my dormitory, which was exciting. I tested my urine once a day because I wasn't going to do that more than once a day with the little medicine cup and the tablets and the strips. And that was ridiculous in the bathroom down the hallway. So I took my shots. Well, then I went to a training course, an education course. Now the course was geared at the local hospital to type 2 diabetics. My mother flew into town from where she lived. And she and I went to this together, and it was obvious the class was for type 2 diabetics. I was the youngest person in the class by lots of years. And the diets they were handing out, it made sense to me, but I don't think it was geared towards me. It was geared toward these type 2s. And I don't even think they called them type 2s back then. I'm not really sure. I mean, it's obviously all fuzzy, but she said, you shouldn't be eating a lot of fruit. And you shouldn't be eating a lot of bread. And you should definitely not be drinking anything that is sugar or calories. Or, I mean, she focused a lot on calories for obvious reasons. But that made sense to me. And I'm like, if a banana is what makes your blood sugar go up, and I'm supposed to take a shot to keep my blood sugar down, that just made sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the blessings of my life is that I was, whether mistakenly or just because of what was available, I was put into this classroom in the basement of the hospital with 25 type 2 diabetics, because her initial instructions were logical to me and I followed them. Now I was 18. And I was in college and I was away from home. And what do you do when you're in college and away from home? You know, I mean, you experiment. But I learned real fast, and keep in mind, I was still urine testing then, that my blood sugar the next morning was better if for dinner I'd had just 2 hamburger patties with bacon and cheese and thrown away my hamburger bun. And I didn't always do it, but I felt better and I realized it. Well, then the endocrinologist that I did go back to one more time, he said, you don't have to do that. He said, you shouldn't eat a lot of it. He said, you can have cake when you get married and you can have champagne when we have a female president elected to the White House. He said, but you don't have to do that because you have insulin. You have insulin. Well, we all know how regular works. I was very logical back then. Regular didn't kick in for 3 to 4 hours. So I was pre-bolusing my lunch between morning classes so that it was hitting my lunch so that then I could run home and test my urine and see if I did it right. It was convoluted. Well, then we got glucometers. After about 2 or 3 months of being diabetic, I got my first glucometer. It cost $599 at the local Walgreens. And I'll never forget handing over my father's credit card to pay for that. I'm like, this is ridiculous. And I was obsessed with poking my finger because I wanted knowledge. Knowledge is power. And that was how I grabbed this. I grabbed hold of this disease. I did not go home and cry. I did not, woe is me. I was ticked off that how dare a doctor look an 18-year-old in the face and say, you might see 35. And so I wanted the knowledge to know that I could prove him wrong. That was what I wanted. I mean, so it's a little bit of vindictiveness in me. It's kind of my persona, but I wanted to prove him wrong. Now, I never saw him again after the second appointment, and I found a much better endocrinologist, but I realized he was not used to dealing with type 1s, definitely not 18-year-old type 1s. So that's some of his advice came from, he dealt mostly with type 2 diabetics who were much older and much more overweight than me, and in less health conditions. So anyway, that is my diagnosis. He did tell me that I would never get married and should never have children, because who would want to marry a diabetic? And diabetics don't have babies, should never have babies because they die, the mothers. And I'm like, okay. So I just figured that, whatever. I didn't need a boyfriend. I didn't need to find a husband because this doctor told me that. Well, luckily, Mr. Keuter came along.
Mm, you know what? It's quite shocking because this was the 1980s. I'm not going back 100 years. This was the 1980s,
Well,
and
he was older. I mean, he was white-haired, feeble. He was probably in his late 60s or 70s. So I figure he'd been in medical school in the 30s or 40s. I don't know.
well, how did your parents handle it?
Um, they were worried. The person that took it the hardest was my grandmother, because that's my father's mother. Her husband was a type 1 diabetic.
Oh,
He died in 1944 or 45. He was an OB-GYN, and he died of tuberculosis. But he was an Olympic athlete for the track team, and he did very well with his diabetes. And you think about it, in the 30s, and I'm not even sure if they had urine testing strips then. I mean, I would love to know, but he was long gone before my father even reached toddlerhood. But she felt the worst. She took it the hardest because she was sure she was to blame. And I'm like, no, it's genetics, Grandma. It's not you. There's nothing you did. It's just genetics. My parents didn't know what diabetes was, really, other than my father knew his father had it, but had never really any memories of his father being diabetic. And I mean, they just said, you do what you need to do. My mother flew into town, and she was there for probably a week or 10 days and helped me get things. And I stocked my dorm refrigerator with food, and bought my insulin, and I don't even really remember what seemed to change. It was just that I was taking shots every day, and I myself was trying to be educated in what I was choosing to eat, because I noticed that change immediately. Now, 2 months later, I went on spring break, and miraculously, I woke up one morning before spring break, and I didn't need to wear my glasses. My eyes had changed. I had perfect vision, which I hadn't had perfect vision since I was a 5th grader. My eyes were perfect. I went on spring break without my glasses. That was the start of my honeymoon period. I took very little insulin for about a month. We didn't call it a honeymoon period back then. We just called it your body's acclimating to insulin and blood sugars and everything. And my doctor said it lasted a couple days, and it took almost 4 weeks. And I think that was because of how I was eating. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe I'm rebuilding my history. I don't know. But that was what I experienced. Almost a month off of insulin. And then I started back overnight. Like, it started overnight. It stopped. Stopped overnight. And I was back on insulin. So that was all good. It was a period of a break, and I could kind of reconnoiter, so to speak, and make a game plan. And it didn't, you know what? Everybody says there's a cycle. with any kind of stress in your life, whether it's divorce or death or a move or a change in careers, that there's an acceptance and there's an anger and there's a sadness and all this circle. I don't remember that. I don't remember being depressed or being sad that I was going to have to take a shot for the rest of my life. I mean, the doctor did tell me that the cure was in 5 years. 5 years. And he said, the people that are going to get the cure are the ones that are the best controlled. And I said, okay, the line starts right here behind me. I'm going to be in the front of that line. That made sense to me. Why would I want to be out of control and feel like crud? The cure is coming in 5 years. I mean, he had talked about losing toes and being blind and losing your fingers and things like that. And I'm like, why would I want a cure? Evidently, I'm not going to look for a husband until after the cure comes. So I wanted all my fingers and toes. So I was a badass back in college. I was a T1D badass back then because it made sense to me to do that, to be the best I could be. And it wasn't that big of a deal. It was, I mean, I would sit at my dormitory dining room table and just take off the buns of my hamburgers or my hoagies, or maybe I'd eat half of it or just the bottom one or whatever. Keeping in mind that our fast acting was regular.
You're still a badass, by the way.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I like to think of myself that way.
You still are. So how
Yes.
did, so there were obviously those injector pens at the time. So you were using disposable syringes? And how
Yes,
did your
syringes.
friends take to it? What was their reaction?
You know what? I was cool. I was the maverick. I mean, come on. Everywhere Susan went, she had a vial of insulin and a syringe in her pocket. I mean, that was just me. It was my thing. Some people had, an inhaler. Some people had an EpiPen. Some people had, antacids or whatever. I had an insulin vial and a syringe. I never made a big deal out of it. It was just who I was. I was also 6 feet tall and had size 11 feet. I mean, I stand out in a room, I do. And it was just part of me. I did not make a big deal out of it. I wasn't like shirking behind the booth at the restaurant. I wasn't running into the bathroom in my classrooms, in my lecture halls. Nah, I just pull it out and stick it in and put the cap back on. It was just not that big of a deal. It shouldn't be. It isn't.
True.
So,
I mean, I always say that, thank God it's diabetes. Thank God it's type 1. That's what I always say, honestly.
well, and
I mean,
there's this huge between type 2 and type 1, and now we have MODY and LADY and type 3 and 3C and flatbush and all these other kinds. But let's face it, it's basically type 2 and type 1. And there's huge, ugly stereotypes around type 2. And there are big, ugly misconceptions around type 1. My favorite phrase is, "You don't look diabetic, Susan." And I'm like, what the hell does a diabetic look like?
or how
Tell
many cakes were you eating when you were diagnosed?
How many what?
How many cakes were you eating?
Exactly. What did you eat? Ooh, what were you eating? And I'm like, whatever. But it's a mindset. And you know what? I attribute a lot of my handling my diagnosis to, I come from a family of strong and powerful women. I told you that my grandfather died from tuberculosis when my father was very young. My grandmother was a total badass in the 1940s. She was a single mother and she rocked it. I mean, my father and my uncle are amazing men, and she did it. And my mother is 82 years old and works me under the table. She leaves me in her dust. And so I attribute a lot of my strength and my backbone to those two women because that's what I came from. Genetics is a wonderful thing.
Is so Susan, how when did you notice a change in maybe it happened with the with the coming of social media? When did you notice a change generally in the diabetes world about, diet?
Um,
When do you think that happened?
I would say obviously social media has been a great thing because people were given these diagnoses in the hospitals, late at night, and mothers and spouses and the patients themselves just sat there crying or scared to death or worried, waiting for the diabetic educator to come in the next morning and then waiting for that endocrinologist appointment in 3 weeks to learn things. But now mothers and spouses and the patients themselves who've just been handed this diagnosis, fathers also, I don't want to leave the fathers out, they scroll social media. They put in type 1 diabetes into Facebook. They go to Instagram and they put in diabetic child. I mean, they have access to information, good, bad, or indifferent. I have opinions of a lot of the information they find, unfortunately, but it's not always what the diabetic educators and the endocrinologists and the nurses are telling us in the hospitals. And I believe that social media has been a fabulous thing. It's obviously perpetuated a lot of the bad stuff, but there is definitely a trend in the last, I would say, 6 to 8 years where groups are at least acknowledging there are groups about eating differently than the standard American diet. There's a curve happening, and the curve is just getting bigger and shallower, meaning it's easier to find information on eating low carb. It's easier to understand glycemic indexes and how safe small numbers of carbs, small numbers of insulin units, it's easier to come across. And sometimes we're allowed to post in mainstream groups. Other times we're not. I've been kicked out of numerous groups, which is a shame, which is like, so you really just want a group that just focuses on the mediocrity. Yes, the mediocrity. But there are more and more groups coming and being formed, groups and pages, just pages like mine, pages where we just, you know what, I'll go for days and days and not post because I'm tired or exhausted or have a to-do list a mile long. But a lot of us we just share our meals. We just share our food. We just show that, you know what, we're not missing out. We're eating.
You share your CGM graphs, and that's always an eye. In fact, you share details like how much our insulin you took for that meal. At what point did you pre-bolus? You share those details, and they're valuable. I learn from them.
Oh, good.
Well, I wonder if I can do that. Or, you always pick up something from other people's experiences. So
absolutely
I'm grateful you do that. I refer people to your page, by the way, because
thank you. Thank you.
You're quite the expert out there. I look forward to your Instagram posts, but they're the same one on your Facebook page.
Yes, they're both.
Wherever
They're both
people are, you can always find T1D Mimi. Coming back to social media, it was because of social media I actually discovered that there is such a thing as a low carbohydrate diet, although I don't like calling it a diet, for
way
type
of
1
eating.
diabetics.
Yes.
And I discovered it completely randomly. I was on YouTube, and one of Jason Fung's videos, presentation, came
He's
my way.
fabulous.
And I wasn't watching anything health related. Maybe I was just looking at, the health benefits of honey, for example, because that's the sort of thing that, don't eat sugar, but you can eat honey, right?
Evidently.
I had no idea, no clue. It was 2015, so it was really early on. We're talking pre-Twitter, right? So pre-Instagram as well. Even Facebook was relatively sort of new. And so I have no idea how that video came about. I watched it And that particular video changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
Changed my life.
Yep.
And then, of course, I found out that, Burstein had written the diabetes solution.
Yep.
And then I found a community on Facebook, but now it's not too difficult. I think, most people at least have heard of it. Maybe they find dietary change daunting, but at least they know that there are hundreds and hundreds of us who are
Right.
not eating massive amounts of carbohydrates, or we are actually eating, if we are eating carbohydrates, they're actually carbohydrates that come from low carbohydrate vegetables, right? Okay,
Right.
so let's
Right.
talk about diet.
Okay. Diet.
T1D Mimi, what are you eating? What sorts of things do you eat as a type 1 diabetic?
Usually during the school year when I am teaching, I don't eat breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I may hit my snooze button a few too many times and I'm usually running around like a chicken with my head cut off. And it's just easier for me to not do breakfast. I never know if I'm going to get to a school to cover a classroom that has a lesson plan or no lesson plan, or does the teacher have playground duty, or is she greeting the buses? It's just easier for me if I go to school with no insulin on board and no food on board. For me, it works for me. I can survive on coffee. I really can. And so, but now that I've not been teaching the last couple of quarters, I'm eggs and meat, eggs and bacon, eggs and sausage, eggs. This morning I had eggs and salmon. I mean, it's just like eggs and a couple of meatballs. Like I have no rules about breakfast, but an egg is the most amazing protein out there. And people that are allergic to eggs, I feel so badly for, because eggs are amazing. And 2 eggs and something on the side, whether it's a couple of blueberries or a couple of cherry tomatoes, a little bit of cheese and 2 sausage links, and I'm good right now. But usually when I'm in the heart of school teaching every day, I skip breakfast typically. And guess what? Diabetics can skip breakfast. If your basal is dialed in, you can skip any meal you want. But lunch, I would say during the school week is my biggest meal of the day. Maybe, usually. And I lay it on. I mean, I have leftovers. A lot of times I do big batches of sausage balls or chicken nuggets or a leftover chicken leg or sliced chicken breast. I love rotisserie chickens, all that kind of stuff. But it's a protein, and it's a lot of it. It's at least 4 ounces, and a lot of times 5 or 6 ounces of protein, and leftover veggies. And I'm not picky. My veggies can be cold. I can have cold green beans. I can have cold leftover roasted cauliflower or broccoli from the night before. I love leftovers. And I would say most of my meals that I cook for my husband and I do cook with the intention of having leftovers, because that just makes packing your lunch easier. But you got to have a little bit of treat in there. So a couple of blueberries or a couple of blackberries or raspberries. And I dose very easily for those. Those are not that big of a deal. And I'm not eating enough to cause any kind of a blood sugar rise. I'm talking like 3 or 4 raspberries and a couple of blackberries. So that works for me. And you got to have veggies. So a lot of it for me is just a box of a salad. I do a lot of greens at lunch. The teachers in the lunchroom always tell me that I should sell my boxes for lunches and just bring them pre-prepared, because everybody is always oohing and eyeing over what I have packed. And I'm like, this is all from dinner last night, or this is from 2 nights ago, but they've run to McDonald's instead. And that always makes me sad, because teachers aren't paid enough and they're spending their hard-earned money on McDonald's, and it's not good, and they're all tired in 90 minutes because of the carb load. We know that.
Well, I'll try and put some of Susan's meals on the screen, so
Okay.
has those images. But I so relate to what you're saying, because when I was teaching, I was in full-time teaching. That's exactly what I did. So my lunch would be the leftovers from the night before, and maybe a few cherry tomatoes added to it, and
Yep.
some leftover broccoli or whatever. Olives, I like olives
Oh,
and
olives,
that
yes.
sort of
Black
thing.
olives and a cheese stick. Yes.
And cheese. So, and there you go, you've got a healthy meal. So I never needed to go to the canteen or anything like that. So now that we describe, I have a good idea. So it's basically protein-based meals with some low carbohydrate vegetables.
Absolutely.
What kind of insulin are you using to cover your meals?
Okay, I am on a tandem T-Slim pump.
Right.
And in that I run Humalog. That serves as my basal, as all pumps do. And that is my pre-meal bolus, if I need one, and any kind of a correction I might need. And then I use regular, Novolin regular, that I buy from Walmart over the counter. And that is what I use for every meal to post bolus for protein.
So does Novolin go in an injector pen
Yes.
or?
No, it's just a syringe.
Right.
Yeah. No, I'm not a fan of pens, insulin pens. There's way too many. I tried a prescription for about 3 months during COVID, and I just had too many mistakes. The needle wouldn't fire. I would like prime the needle and nothing would come out, and I'd prime the needle again and nothing would come out, and finally I'd prime the needle and something would come out, and I'm like, how do I know if it's in my body if something's coming out? It just confused me, and I couldn't see it. I didn't like that. I like drawing up a unit and a half, putting it in my body, and knowing that it went in. I like that.
That
There's
makes
confidence. Yes.
sense. So I'm on a pump too. I've been on a pump 20 years now. So
Same 25 years.
so one of the things that people say about when people object to pumps or they're not fond of pumps, they say two things. Oh, it will leave, or it has the potential to leave scar tissue. I personally have none. And the second thing is the pump will fail or could fail.
And I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. I mean, there's a lot of coulds in this world. There are a lot of coulds. I could have the vial out at a restaurant and drop it and shatter it on the ceramic floor. I mean, there's all kinds of coulds. I have been a pumper since 1999. 1999. And one time I've had a pump malfunction. And it wasn't an injection malfunction. I just got this screeching alarm and I looked down and it said, basically, your pump is dead. You need to call the manufacturer. And it was some weird systems error. And I called and they FedExed me a new pump and I had it the next afternoon. In 25 years, I've traveled out of this country. I've traveled around this country. I've been on hundreds of airplane flights. I've been in caves. I've been on water rafting cruises on the rivers. I've never had anything go wrong with the pump.
Nor have I. I haven't either. I haven't either. Not with a pump. I've had pod or cannula failures. Cannula failures, basically. I've had those. But you deal with it. It's like, so you get a high, and then, if you're checking yourself, I have a CGM. But even when I did not have a CGM,
yes,
and I did have a cannula failure,
yes,
I would check because I was constantly checking my glucose levels. And okay, so why am I high now? That doesn't make sense. I wonder if it's the cannula. And of course, you check, and yes, you're bleeding. You deal with it.
Bent. Yes.
Oh, yes, those bent ones. So you just deal with it and you correct it. And I love my pump. Anyway.
I do too. And I struggled for years and years with long acting. The only long acting we had back then that I was aware of or that I was ever offered was Lantus.
Yeah.
Lantus. And I just could not get it. I worked with my endo. I hated it. I hated being reactive to a shot I took 12 or 24 hours ago. I hated that feeling. I felt very constrained to what I could do because at the time my husband was in professional baseball and you just never knew. If the baseball game got rained out and you guys went bowling with all the other management, that was activity. but wait, I took a shot 14 hours ago and now I'm going low. I hated being reactive to those injections. And when a pump was finally presented to me in a manner that made sense, it was, oh, I can adjust my basal. I could dial it back if we decided to do something. It opened up a whole world to me, and it made so much sense. Now I know people that are total rock stars, MDI, and that's great. We have a lot of different long-acting insulins available now. I've never used one of them. So, but I love my pump. So,
yeah, I love being able to adjust the basal. I think that's my favorite aspect of the pump. And of course, also it cuts down on the number of injections. And I was diagnosed at 5. You were 18. I was
yes,
5. So back
yes,
in 1978. So you get tired of the number of injections. I
sure.
really don't want the injections, manual injections, but I am considering introducing R now, Novolin R, and using that for my meals and see if it would make any difference, because I've kind of figured out how to use rapid acting insulin to cover my proteins now. So
Right. And I did that for years. I mean,
that
I
worked
I
out.
did the extended boluses and the temporary base. Oh my, the first 2 pumps I was on, Ping and Cosmo, they didn't have temp basals, but they had extended boluses. I think that's how it worked. Anyway, so I was a pro at extended boluses. I mean, I had that down. I would figure out my protein and I'd cut it in half and I'd plug it in with carbs and blah, blah, blah. And I didn't even know what I was doing. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing because we didn't have social media. And my doctor was like, you are crazy. What you are doing is you're not using the pump how it's intended to be used. And I'm like, well, then turn your eyes, then look away. She would pull up my downloads and she's like, this makes no sense. But I did it. Was it a lot of work? It was.
Yeah.
It was. It was a lot of work and a lot of and I didn't have a Dexcom at the time. I've only had a Dexcom for 6 years. And so it was finger pokes. It was finger pokes. And I was poking my finger 12 to 15 times a day when I was awake. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So when I finally got talked into a CGM, and I had said no for a CGM for years, I'm like, I don't need a CGM. Why do I need a CGM? My A1Cs were great. My pump was working fine. I had no reason. Well, then menopause started. And that makes things a little bit more fun.
Well, yes. I know.
Always.
I know. So, are you using the closed loop system?
No, I'm using
No,
on my Tandem, I use Basal IQ, which
right.
suspends for lows. That's it. It doesn't do anything else.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't reduce basal, it just suspends basal. So that's it. And it's no longer being offered. And so I'm having my own little pity party because I don't know what I'm going to do when my warranty is up next January. I don't know what I'll do. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Decision making will come your way. Well, Susan, that was that was, I enjoyed your sort of type 1 story, if it can ever be enjoyable. I really love taking us through that. And I could relate to so many parts of it. But I mean, you were clearly, even as an 18-year-old, you were badass.
I was a badass. There you go. You can say it. There you go.
We really use that in Britain. So
yeah.
I try to say it the American way, because I've only heard Americans say it, so it doesn't come out bad.
It doesn't come out smoothly.
It doesn't come out the same way, no. But you were resilient, right? And that resilience helped you or stayed with you when you recently found out or were diagnosed with cancer.
Yes.
With that too.
Okay, so 2018, I've always had mammograms in January so that they're over by the time my birthday comes in February. January is always my mammogram, dentist, all the fun stuff month. And my mammogram came back. Oh, you need to have a biopsy. Okay, big deal. I've had one before a couple years ago. This biopsy did not pass. Then they had to do the other test, which is like an MRI, blah, 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 several other different tests. And then they're like, you have cancer. You have breast cancer.
Right.
And I'm like, okay. It took me a matter of 12 seconds to say, I'm doing double mastectomy. I'm 50. Let's see what I just turned. I was 52. I'm like, my children are grown. I do not need my breasts. Take them both. They took them off in a mastectomy on August 1st. The lymph nodes came back clear. So I never remember all these letters. Positive, positive, negative, negative, positive, which is like the good kind, which I hate to say, but it's hormone based. So we don't need to do chemotherapy. We don't need to do radiation. We're just going to do the mammogram and you're going to be on a hormone blocker for the next 10 years. I'm like, well, okay, let's do it. Let's get it scheduled. Did the double mastectomy. They wanted to put me on steroids. I said, no, 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 we don't do steroids when we're diabetics. And they're like, oh, we'd really like you to do some steroids. This is a big surgical procedure. And the other thing was that my daughter and son-in-law were getting married 2 months later. And I said, okay, I'll do the steroids if it's going to make me heal faster.
Right.
Because I needed to be ready for the wedding. I needed to be at the wedding and I needed to be top notch at the wedding because it's my daughter getting married. And so I took the steroids, dexamethasone. I think that's how you say it. Whatever. I always just call it Dex, but then people get confused when I say Dexcom. Took the steroids for 2 weeks. Then I said, okay, can we stop? And they're like, that's okay. You can stop because it makes your blood sugars go a little wonky. And my prognosis was great. I mean, my prognosis was very good. And for 5 years, I took the hormone blockers and my blood work came back and they're like, it's good. This is, you did it. You're in remission. On August 1st of 2023, 6 months ago, I went to my oncologist and he said, you can celebrate. You are officially in remission. 5 years, you are in remission. And I celebrated big time because remission is a big milestone when you're fighting cancer. And 3 weeks later, I woke up with double vision in my eye. I thought it might be vertigo. I've had a bout of vertigo before, and I thought, maybe this is vertigo. Like, how much did I have wine to drink last night? I don't know. Like, well, I can't see. I'm double vision. And we went through the course of the day, and I'm like, this is not vertigo because the room is not moving. I just can't focus. So Monday, I went to the eye doctor. He said, your eyes are fine. There's not like, you don't have a torn retina. You don't have a cornea, something. Everything is fine. You need to go get an MRI. Called my endocrinologist. She would not write me a script for an MRI.
MRI of what?
Of my head, my eye, my head. I needed something to tell me why I have double vision. Endocrinologist said that's not my scope of practice. So I went over to my my oncologist, and I said, I need you to write me a script for an MRI. He's like, why? I'm like, because I have double vision. And he did some checking, asked me some questions. I'm like, I've been in remission for 3 weeks. Don't you mess this up. He put me in a wheelchair. He took me over to the ER of the hospital. I spent the next 5 days in the hospital and had an MRI. I had a tumor in my eye socket. I had 2 tumors in the top of my vertebrae, my spinal column, and I had 2 tumors in my liver. I did every test known to man in those 5 days: the liver biopsy, the heart echocardiogram, the bone scan, the CAT scan, another MRI. We did a PET scan. We did it all in 5 days. But I wasn't sick. I mean,
you had no symptoms? No,
just the eye,
just the eye.
just the double vision. And so I was walking around the hospital for 5 days, hanging out with the nurses, watching Husker volleyball, ordering my meals. We had amazing hospital food. I made sure that the oncologist did not put me on the diabetic diet while I was there. I was able to order my own food. I ate like a queen while I was there. And Monday night, the doctor came over and said, you have metastatic breast cancer. It's back. And I'm like, no, I think you might be mistaken. Just 3 weeks ago, you said I was in remission. That was not the case. I was no longer in remission. So metastatic breast cancer just means breast cancer is back. That's what metastatic means. And I learned that. I literally did not know what the difference was. So metastatic breast cancer, it's now back. And he wants me to start radiation tomorrow. And I said, that's good because I have a new grandbaby coming January 24th, and I intend to be there. So you get this figured out between now and January 24th. This was August 26th.
Mm.
And so we did 10 doses of radiation and 35 days of steroids, which was not fun, but I did really well with it. I personally, for me, myself, I am not a doctor. I was taking my steroid pill and dosing regular for that steroid, dexamethasone. I was taking it twice a day, and it was not fun. But my averages bumped up. My A1C did not change.
Wow.
Did not change in those 30 days. Now, granted, A1C is for 90 days. I had it tested at the end of the steroid dose. It was hard work. That was the hardest thing I did as far as cancer treatments was the freaking steroid. And if you think about it, what radiation is and what chemotherapy is, and the hardest thing for me was the steroid. But I stopped working for most of that. I did have a couple assignments that I worked on as far as school, but it was a full-time job. CGM, studying the CGM, studying the patterns, waking up in the middle of the night to do a correction dose. I had alarm ladders, Sugarmate, my pump, my Dexcom. I had all set at different levels. I did adjust my levels, what I was willing to accept. I went up to 140 for that period of time. And I did, as far as I was concerned, I did great. My oncologist was shocked, but I told him when he sat in my hotel, when he sat in my hospital room and told me the cancer was back, he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "You treat me like I'm a cancer patient, not like I'm a diabetic. I will do the diabetes. I will do that. You treat me and you throw at me whatever will get me through this. You throw it all the meds, all the chemo, all the hormone blockers. You do anything to get me through this. I will take care of everything else." And he said, okay. And I told him that night of my mind shift, which was the buffalo. If you've looked at my page, you know that the buffalo has taken over my life in the last 6 months. And it's because buffalo in nature will never run away from a storm. The elk, the moose, the bears, the deer, the foxes, the shrews, the mice, they know a storm is coming and they run away, which just prolongs the time that they're going to deal with the danger. A buffalo paws at the dirt, puts his big old head down, and runs into the storm. Because that's the fastest way to get through it. You think about it. If the storm is coming toward you out on the plains of the Midwest, you run through it, and you're going to be through it fast. You're going to be on the other side of it faster, way faster than turning around and running with the storm. So be the buffalo, charge the storm was my mantra. I have an awesome online community, groups that I belong to, and people that follow my page, which shocks me every day that people want to hear my words and read what I have to write. I got buffaloes from all over the world. Buffalo earrings, buffalo necklaces, buffalo afghan, buffalo socks, buffalo notebooks, buffalo t-shirt. Be the buffalo, charge the storm.
Thank you for sharing the buffalo story, because I never understood it.
Okay.
I've been seeing the buffalo in your posts and I'm thinking, am I missing something? Oh, this must be American thing.
No, there's my buffalo tattoo. There's my buffalo tattoo. No, it's the American bison. That's what they do. It is just in their DNA that if the huge storm is coming down from the mountains, they walk right into it. I mean, they're stupid. If you think about it, that's not very smart. They should lay down in a ravine or something and protect themselves. No, they walk right into it because that's the fastest way through it. And I had a goal. My grandbaby was coming and we were pretty sure she was going to be our last. I was going to be there. January 24th. I had to be there. And the only way to get through it was to put my head down, paw at the dirt, and just do it all. And so 10 radiations in 10 consecutive days. That's a lot. When it made the radiation made progress on my tumors, but it didn't get him to where my oncologist was happy. He said, "Are you ready for chemotherapy?" And I said, "You bring it on." And he said, "We want to do 12 doses." And I said, "Okay, 12 weeks. He goes, "Oh, no. We usually do every 3 weeks." And I said, "I don't have time to do that. I have to be somewhere by the end of January." I said, 12 weeks. You have 12 weeks. He's like, "Okay, remember you're diabetic." And I'm like, you treat me like a normal cancer patient. I said, I will handle the diabetes. So we did 12 consecutive weeks of Taxol, which is a big chemo. Every Wednesday, I was there for the whole morning, being infused with poison. Basically, let's think about it. That's kind of what chemotherapy is. And we did it. And I did my last chemo on January, I think it was the 18th, and on Wednesday, and I flew out Saturday morning to Nebraska, and my grandbaby was born the next Tuesday.
Congratulations. I saw the picture.
Thank you. Yeah, so I made it. And because of the buffalo. I am the buffalo.
You are the buffalo. You are the buffalo. Let's talk about, okay, so you had absolutely no symptoms. 2018 was the first time you were diagnosed with, was it the lymph?
Breast cancer, and it was just from a mammogram.
And you were, you couldn't feel anything. There was nothing in there.
No, I will admit, once they told me where the lump was and showed me, I could feel it. I could feel it. But it was that whole, like, you could feel it on the inside. Like I couldn't feel it on my husband couldn't feel it. I could feel it on the inside. But once they pointed it out, yes.
Right. So what else was affected by the treatments, be it the radiation or the chemotherapy, like appetite? Obviously, the steroids impacted your blood sugars, and you dealt with them.
Yes.
But what else? Like appetite,
the biggest effect of radiation was because of where they were radiating, which was they basically were going through the top of my ears to get behind my eye socket.
Yeah.
And then they were doing through my throat to get to the top of my vertebrae, the vertebrae at the top of my spine. Because of where my whole head, they were radiating. I had horrible taste. My taste buds were cooked, I guess is what you could say. I had no appetite, and my throat, I never ever want to go through that again. Swallowing water was a physical challenge. Nothing tasted good. I lived on cottage cheese and very soft, soggy, wet scrambled eggs. That was what I lived on for numerous weeks. I was losing weight very rapidly. I finally figured out a protein shake smoothie that I could tolerate, that did not jack up my numbers, and that I could get down just to get protein in me. And the doctors, and mainly the nurses, the radiation nurses they're angels in the making. And they wanted so badly to help me to get something in my body as far as calories. And they were like, go get a root beer float, or go get a chocolate malt, or, eat some cotton candy. I mean, anything that I could tolerate in my throat, they wanted me to eat. And I'm like, no, I am leading with protein. And that was when I found out cottage cheese mixed with scrambled eggs that were kind of undercooked, as long as they were very wet, very, very wet, I could take little tiny bites and get that down. And it was the protein. I had to lead with protein because I was not going to let cancer muck up my blood sugar any more than the steroids could. So that's what I did. That's what I lived on, eggs and cottage cheese for 2 months. 2 months during
January this year, right?
No, my radiation was last September.
September.
Last September, we did 10 doses. And then I had to go, then I went on an oral chemotherapy, $17,000 a month. Try that. I'd rather buy insulin.
Is that not covered?
No, it's not covered. It's brand new. It's not brand new. So thankfully, insurance and copay cards and things like that got it for the most part covered. Did that for a couple of months, and it was just not working fast enough that my oncologist was not happy, and he said, we're gonna go right to chemo, to infused chemo. And so we started that on November 1st. So it was all November, all December, and the bulk of January to get my 12 weeks in. And I never changed how I ate. Never. Didn't even consider it, because you can't control cancer. I mean, you are at the mercy of the drugs. You're at the mercy of the treatment, whether it's radiation or injections or chemotherapy. You're at the mercy. It's not like, well, if you go out and sit in the sun, it'll get better faster. Or if you exercise 5 miles a day, it'll get better faster. You're at the mercy of the treatments and the drugs. But what I could control was my diabetes. I could control my blood sugar. I could control my diet. And I could stay as healthy as possible. And that was what I did. And my prognosis is very good. My tumor markers are outstanding. My oncologist looks at me and says, I just can't even believe this is blood work from a diabetic cancer patient. He said most cancer patients will always miss a week or two of their treatment because of their numbers, because they're anemic, because their liver function is way off the chart, because their blood counts, their white blood cells, their red blood cells are not where they should be. And so we have to make you miss a treatment. And I said, I had a goal. And that was to be there for my grandbaby and my daughter. So I had to stay true to eating how I eat and controlling my numbers how I like them controlled. That was what I did. I mean, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal to me. It really doesn't. Just keep doing what you can control. I can't control cancer. I controlled my diabetes. That was what I did.
Did you take any supplements? Just out of curiosity, I'm asking.
You know what? They don't want you to take, because normally, like on a regular day, I take CoQ10 and I take vitamin D and I take vitamin B and I take fish oil. They don't want you to take any of that while you're doing chemo, because that's a variable.
Right.
So I stopped all of my supplements. And it didn't seem to, I mean, the only thing I did not stop was my electrolytes. I'm like, I have to keep taking my electrolytes. And he goes, oh, that's fine. That's fine. You can keep taking potassium and magnesium and sodium. And everything was fine. Everything stayed fine. So I didn't see any ill effects of stopping my vitamin D, my fish oil, BD fish oil, CoQ10. I take some other things for eye health. But yeah, I stopped all of those for 12 weeks and I've noticed no ill effects. So it was fine. Yeah. So
Well,
right now we're into the stage of I'm just on hormone blockers, which you would think post-menopausal you don't have hormones. Oh no, we still have lots of hormones in our bodies. And so we are just blocking every blessed one of them that we can, hoping to shrink these tumors even more, hoping that my tumor markers, which is what they track, keep going down, which I cannot wait for my next blood work, which will be in 3 more weeks. That'll be a day I'm celebrating. Assuming that the numbers are down, and I think they will be. But other than that, I mean, I just keep doing what I'm doing, which is taking my insulin, running my basal, taking my regular to cover protein. I mean, I don't know why someone would stop eating this way to control your diabetes when you can't control cancer. You can't control cancer, but I sure as hell can control my diabetes. Oh, and people will get mad when I say the word control. You are managing. Okay, how is managing?
I've been corrected as well, but
Oh, yeah.
I guess both, I mean, whichever way you want to use, I mean, both make sense to me.
Right, right, right.
So both
So
make
anyway,
sense.
I am in charge of my diabetes via health, via food, the food I choose to eat, and the way I choose to dose. And it's working well. I had my A1C done 2 weeks ago and I'm 4.9.
That's amazing.
Which is up from 4.7 when I started this whole process.
Despite everything you've been through,
Yeah.
4.9 is a wonderful A1C.
I think so. I'm very happy
I've
with
never been 4.1, so I'll look forward to that. So hopefully R will help me. So
it. And you know what?
I'm still in non-diabetic range, but definitely
Right.
4.9. So never been
And you
that
know
low.
what? Non-diabetic range is awesome. Is awesome.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to personally make it even lower, then you go for it. But don't feel pressured to do it. I mean, if you're in a non-diabetic range, freaking rock star. You have a big old star on your head because you're doing it. And you've been diabetic since you were 5?
46, so 46 years for me.
Yeah. So you're way ahead of me. I just hit 39. You're ahead of me.
46 years. I forget
Yes.
sometimes because I forget my age, you see, so then I have to go back and do the
I know.
math.
I always have to do the math. I'm like, well, 85, where are we? 39 years. Yes.
So, okay, just one question. So with the hormone blockers, so how are your menopausal symptoms like, okay, brain fog and all of those? So are they,
You
or
know
you
what?
already done with those sort of menopausal symptoms or brain fog?
Yeah.
What's the other one? Fatigue and
Hot flashes, fatigue.
rashes. Yes, night sweats.
No, you know what? I always hate confessing this, but pregnancy, my menstrual cycle never gave me blood sugar problems. My hormones never did. It was just I mean, I know there are people that have written huge books on pregnancy and diabetes. They've written articles. They've got huge charts on when they increase basal and when the lutein phase and I mean, you know what? I never had.
Yeah.
I never had problems with my hormones. Menopause was just not that big of a deal for me. It really wasn't. These hormone blockers are very different. Because I think they're blocking all hormones. They're trying to get rid of all the hormones. My tumors, my breast cancer was estrogen based. And so you would think that menopause would have taken care of that, I guess. But they're still trying to block more estrogen, any other estrogen. Because the tumors in my liver, my vertebrae, and my eye are still breast cancer, which my son does not understand. It is not a new cancer. It is breast cancer that has now shown up in other areas. That is what metastatic means. It's the same cancer, and they have to treat it as estrogen based. And so that's what these hormone blockers are doing. Do I have brain fog? I did with the first drug they tried. Then the current treatment is 2 big old injections in my booty every couple of weeks. I have not noticed brain fog with this, thank goodness. I have normal fatigue, but some of that can also still be the chemotherapy holdover. See, it's hard to pinpoint why am I so tired? It's because your body is going through a lot of stuff right now. It could just be because of that. Is it because of the hormone blocker? I won't know for a while. I have one more shot in another week, and then I will get the shot once a month. And then, so my oncologist said, in the middle of the summer, you'll have a little bit better handle on, are you feeling fatigued because of these injections? So it's everything my body's been through in 6 months. I mean, I'm just tired talking about it at times. So I don't know if the fatigue is from the injection, from the treatment, from the hormones, from the lack of hormones. I mean, who knows? Who knows? But it'll sort itself out. Right now, I don't know what it's related to. But I never did have blood sugar issues with my hormones. Pregnancy, oh my gosh, if I could be pregnant all the time, it would be a fabulous thing. Because
Wonderful.
pregnancy was a piece of cake. It really was. And I did get married. I did have 2 babies, healthy. They're fabulous. I have 3 granddaughters. It's a wonderful thing. And that is what I do this all for, because I intend to annoy them all in my old age.
I wonder where your doctor is now. The white-haired doctor.
Yes, I go and dance on his grave when I go back to my hometown.
Oh, I think he deserves that. So, Susan, I can never have enough of your positivity and your stories. And in fact, I love your stories. Talking of stories, I love the stories of the children who interact with you at school.
Yes. Oh, I love
And they're so sweet because I've had those experiences when I was a teacher. So I
Yes.
always enjoy reading those. So
Yes.
I don't know what to say other than thank you so much for coming on today and sharing
Thank
your
you.
story. Susan the Buffalo, everyone. Please support her.
Be the buffalo. Be the
Um,
buffalo, charge the storm. It's, you know what? I just made a post the other day, just as my final thought is, I see too many people that say, we don't want to curb their diet. We don't want to take anything away because we want them to feel like everybody else. And I'm like, you're not like everybody else. I mean, before I was diabetic, I was the 6 foot tall 6th grader who was about 12 inches taller than my teacher. I was not the same. I've been wearing glasses since I was a 5th grader. Not the same. Red hair all through school. Not the same. Throw diabetes in it. Who cares? It's just one more thing that makes me me. You are you. I am me. I'm sitting here with kiwi head and glasses and a pump on my waist and a CGM on my arm. Not the same. I'm also battling cancer. Not the same. I don't want to be the same. No parent wants all of their children to be the same. They're never the same. Sometimes we wish they were the same. It'd be easier, but they're not the same. If diabetes is what makes you different, you need to learn to embrace it. You just have to. Yeah.
Really is no other way. There really is no other way. You have to embrace it so that you can live with it and stay healthy.
Right. Because regardless of what our doctors all told us, and I think everybody's been told, oh, the cure is coming in 5 to 10 years.
I've been hearing that since the 70s.
Exactly. And me since the 80s. It's not common, guys. It's not common. They have not figured out what causes diabetes. They cannot figure out how to cure it until they figure out what causes it. That's my daughter's a geneticist. She's working on all kinds of research projects at the Med Center in Omaha, Nebraska. And she's like, they don't know what causes type 1. They really don't. They really don't. They can't cure it. And all of her research projects that she gets offered are for type 2 diabetes. Because they know what causes that.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know what causes type 1. So it is what it is. I'm going to be diabetic until the day I die. And that I'm okay with that. My husband's never known me as a non-diabetic. My children have never known me as a non-diabetic. They might not like me as a non-diabetic.
In fact, I don't know myself. I don't remember myself not being diabetic. I was 5. So I don't remember much of life before 5.
You do not remember before. Yeah, you don't remember being not diabetic.
So I'm very happy, and content with what I have, and with the right tools and the right knowledge and understanding, you can manage it or
Absolutely.
control it, whichever one pleases you more. You can do a good job and you can live a healthy life with it. That's what I would say. Susan, we're running out of time.
Yep.
One more time, thank you so much. All your links will be below, and I absolutely urge everyone to support Susan online because her positivity is unmatched and her wisdom is unparalleled.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this forum. Thank you so much for doing all the work you do, because you do contribute so much around the diabetic community. Thank you.
Kisses. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Yes.